You know who's a great guy? Mike Carparelli. If you go to carparelligutars.com, he'll send you some of the best guitar components money can buy. Or he'll build you an absolute soulmate of a guitar. I play a Carparelli. You should too. Welcome to Chapter 4, or Video 4, of our series on tracking your own beats in Midi. And if you've made it thus far, I can't see you, I don't know where you are, but I'm sure you're doing great and you're learning lots. Let's recap where we are. We have created the basis for a beat for our song. And in the last chapter, we looked at understanding velocity, and that's going to be some essential background knowledge for this part, because we are going to start looking at adding accents and grace notes and things like that in order to bring out the dynamics of our beat. So far, our beat is sounding okay, but it's rather simplistic, and we can do things to augment and build up and add some character to that. If your goal is to quote unquote humanize your drum beat, that means try to emulate what drummers naturally do. You have to think about what they do with their hands and their feet, and how they a drummer may add things to the bar or add little quirks to the beat to make it their own. And of course, you can emulate that in Midi. On the other hand, you may be making a song that is just very mechanical, and it just sounds very straightforward and has a very simple type of rhythm, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that you want to have the flexibility and the techniques available to you to do that and take what is in your head and lay it down on the computer. I want you to have this video for free, but if you've got $2 or $3 lying around and you can kick them over here, it helps me take time from my real job and do more of this. So find the link below, go to PayPal, select only the least of what you can afford, and just know that I'd really appreciate it. Let's get into it. The first thing you want to think about when you've gotten this far is to try to find the natural accent of the rhythm. And certain types of music will suggest this. If you're playing reggae and it has a syncopated rhythm, or ska or something like that, you can really feel that 1 and 2 and 3 and you're trying to bring that out in the beat. In our case here, we have a pretty straightforward backbeat, so the accent is on the 2 and the 4, and you can hear that quite strongly. You can punch up that part by just punching up the snare velocity a bit. Of course, you can overdo it, and you have to do some trial and error and experimentation and find the sweet spot. But nonetheless, the natural accent is often predicted by the songwriter and what the songwriter hears in their head and how they would like it to lay out. And you're trying to bring that into your rhythm. On the other hand, you might want to break up that accent by adding some grace notes and some accented notes, or ghost notes as they call them. And so that the beat is not sounding so monotonous and a little too plain. It really depends on how you would like your song to go. What we're going to do is take the basis that we have built up here and add to it. Let's take a look at the initial beat that I had chosen for this song, which is the Diet Pop beat from municipalman.com. And we'll use it as a bit of a model to get us going. Okay, it doesn't sound the best on this kit, but not too bad. A few things you will notice that are different to the beat that we have is the snare is heavier, and there is a shaker added over top of the beat or underneath it, depends on how you look at it. And there is this variation in the hi-hat over here because we want this accent to happen later. We would like to space it out. So you can set your loop, your main loop, as long as you want. Could be 2, 4, 6, 8, whatever, and add variations as it goes along. It depends, again, how you would like it to go. So let's add a few of these elements to our beat and see how I got there. All right, first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to cheat a little bit and just I'm going to copy and paste these shaker notes because it'll allow me to not have to do it. I'm going to put that at the beginning there. If you're copying and pasting, you have to highlight the track you are pasting to. Locate the playhead where you would like the notes to start. I can just do that. And there they are on our shaker. And if we look at the pattern of the shaker, notice the variation in the velocities here. The heavier notes are on the beginning of the bar, and then there are some accented notes, and then a slight little variation here. Okay, and if you're listening to that, okay, I actually think the shaker in this drum kit sounds a little too pronounced, so I'm going to reduce the velocity on those by quite a lot. I'm going to take these down into the 10 and below range. And the reason is that the shaker is not a main part of the beat. It's really just to fill out some of the space. And really, it's this part of the shaker that is adding the accent there. Again, you hear it going da 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 da. We're going to put a pin in that for now. We might come back and change it depending on how it sounds a little later. Let's take a look at the kick. So far, we have a pretty simple kick pattern on the 1 and the 3, which is a pretty standard backbeat type of kick pattern. But if we listen to it in context and we hear the bass, we can hear that the bass actually is a little more going on than the kick. Okay, so let's listen to it in context. Right, so you can hear that there's a bass note here, and there's another one here. If we add a note here, it's going to augment that part of the bar and augment that bass note. So let's listen to that. Okay, sounds pretty good. Let's see what happens if we bring down the velocity on these two notes that we added. It's down to about 30. As at full velocity, this note really punches up that part of the bar too much. And what I want to do here is create a relative velocity effect. And this is something you can understand about how changing the velocity on certain notes will change the overall feeling of a section of a beat. If I have two notes here and the second one has a heavier velocity and it's punched up a little more, and then I put one beside it or close to it that has a lower velocity, it creates a relative velocity effect. I'm not sure what you're hearing there, but to me it sounds like the lower velocity first note pushes the accent onto the 3 of the bar. And that adds a counterweight to the snare. And that's what I'm hearing when I do this. It almost sounds like the beat is tick-tocking between the bass note on the 3 and the snare on the 2 and the 4. So earlier when I was suggesting that you want to find the natural accent, that's kind of what I was talking about. You're just trying to find the pocket where the beat really lives. So let's hear what these accents have done. We've talked about the kick, and if you can hear the shaker in the background at this point, it's adding a little skip to that part of the beat, but it's really not pronounced. It's a very quiet nuance. I actually find this one's making it a little too busy. There we go. That gives it a little more space. What do those little accents do? Well, to the listener, they probably wouldn't be able to recognize it unless they were listening very closely. But it creates a little hook that catches the ear. And it's not something you can necessarily put your finger on while you're listening to a song, but listening to it fills in that space a bit, and it anticipates something that's coming up that the listener might enjoy listening to. But that's just me. Okay, and I'm trying to take advantage of the full range here without overbearing the beat with too many complexities, but just adding tasteful accents to what is available in the bar. Okay, if that is gelling with you to a comfortable level, then let's move on to the hi-hat. Right, looking closely at the colors, we can see that we have the bass velocity range of this part of the hi-hat, and then I've added a hi-hat note with a higher velocity at 65. Okay, these are very quiet at 15. And then I have a hi-hat swell, and it's pretty heavy at 70. Okay, and what it's doing is it's creating this little variation here, and because the velocity range is heavier, it will pop out of the beat, and you can just hear it at the end of the phrase. A little note about hi-hat swells. The hi-hat note that follows the swell will stop it. So these are sort of grouped together. So in this case, this note here, which is onto the loop, will stop this hi-hat swell. And you can decide if you want an eighth note or a quarter note. Often a 16th note swell is a little too short and it will sound just like a little blip, but nonetheless you can hear it. So if I, just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to add a note here. Okay, and this note is going to stop this swell. And you can hear it there. And the velocity range on this second note will predict how the stoppage of the swell sounds. If I pump up the velocity range on that, you'll hear it as a separate note. So you have to decide how you want it to sound. They both sound okay. I want that swell to be a little longer, so I'm just going to take that note out anyhow. But you get the idea. So let's recreate this little variation in our beat. Right. So our hi-hat swell is this note on the 4 and we're adding a note here. And these two notes are about 70 in range. There we go. Let's hear how it sounds on this kit. Sounds pretty good. All right, let's listen to that in context. All right, let's catch up with ourselves before we move on. So far, we've added some accents and grace notes in order to add some variation, so we can see how this little hi-hat variation adds a little hook to the end of the phrase. We have seen how changing the velocity on this double kick here helps to create a natural accent in the song so that it sort of sits in the pocket a little bit, depending on how we would like it to sound. And we're using this very quiet shaker in the background to break up the beat a bit. And it adds some extra dimension to the whole beat. Again, this is all a matter of taste. It just depends what you hear and how you would like your beat to come about. All right, let's move on and add just one more thing to this beat, just for the sake of experimentation. Let's go down to the kick a bit. And we're going to add some ghost notes, what drummers call ghost notes, I think. That's what they call it. And these are very quiet little taps that add some dimension to a beat. And you can sort of imagine if a drummer is working his or her hands, they don't tend to tap things right on the beat. They tend to have ghost notes that fill out the beat a bit. And we can try things like that just to see how it changes the overall feeling. All right, let's try a couple of things here. I'm going to take a note and add it here, and I'm going to drop the velocity down really low, maybe like 1, 2 maybe. Okay, that's not making a big difference. I think if I there. And actually, I can augment this variation by adding a little kick tap on the 16th note and the hi-hat. Let's solo that out and listen to the beat alone. You almost can't hear it in context. The little grace notes almost get lost in the beat. But if there's a gap in the song and the kick comes through momentarily, it can help to add another little hook, another little dimension to the beat. But anything that is playing on this note will be naturally augmented by having that low end kick, even if it's very light. Just fill out that space. You might decide that this beat's getting a little too busy. There's just too much going on. It really depends. Again, it's all a matter of taste. And you might just really like it and think that it really works. And you can do similar things with the snare. Let's try something like this. And you can add a little ghost note going back to the 1. Adding a relative velocity effect here, where the quiet one sort of makes the loud one a little more effective. Or you can add this little ghost note here, which makes it go back to the 1 with a ba-da, like this. And it creates a little more dynamic pattern. Again, you might find this just makes it a little too busy. Or you can do things like this at different parts of the song to add a variation. Like sometimes if you have a breakdown, you want to loosen up the pattern a bit. And it's a good idea to try something like that just to see how it works. All right, let's leave that for now. You guys are smart. I'm sure you're picking this up and understanding it. We're going to move on to chapter 5, and in chapter 5, we're going to add some variations on the beat for different parts of a song, like the chorus or the bridge. And we're also going to start adding some fills to cue up the changes. And that's a great skill. And you're going to need all that we've learned so far in order to do that. If you do have questions, put them in the comments, and I do get back to everyone. So we will see you in chapter 5.